Hi, Tim.
Okay, now, all right.
Yeah.
And okay, there I am.
Yeah, here we are. Yeah. Thanks for coming. I'm not sure. We sent some information in the message, to
We'll see who shows up.
different groups, but not sure. It's Friday. Okay, we have Revere here. So how's your week?
Well, I'm glad it's over, so to speak. I spent the previous week getting over the flu.
Oh yeah, I heard about that.
And I'm a bit better now. I guess you could say that it's been more or less successful.
Yeah, I was worried about your situation. Not sure you can make it, but glad you're good now. Yeah, I heard it's a flu season somehow.
It is, and there's something. I had several students out sick. There's something going around, and if it's what I had, it wasn't so much that it was physically bad, although it was, but I never ran a fever, but it had me in its grip and it just would not let go.
It's not COVID, right? It's not different.
It's not, no, it was definitely not COVID, and it wasn't a cold. It was some kind of flu. Which, as I say, I mean, I've had the flu where I literally passed out on the floor. It was so bad, and that wasn't that way this time. I was just weak and constantly my nasal passages were just like totally shut down. And it just, I would rest and do all the things I'm supposed to do, and it just would not let its grip go.
Mercy.
So
yeah, it's bad. I don't know, the last 3 years, somehow it's just crazy.
yeah.
COVID is never ending.
I've had COVID and briefly, and this wasn't it. I actually had COVID while I was in Israel, and it was like a bad cold, but I tested positive. So, and I'd been fully vaccinated, and I kept up with all of that. So, but I didn't get my flu shot, which was a mistake. So I'm telling everybody to get their flu shot.
Yeah, maybe this year, yeah, I should have. I got allergic to some kind of a flu shot, so I never took.
Oh.
I'll take the risk. I guess Laura Valerie will be here soon.
Okay.
Let's wait some minutes maybe. The last time I talked to Kristen, from
yes,
Office of Global Engagement, she said she's going to Italy.
She's coming home today. She was there this week.
Oh, I see.
And she was checking out. Well, she carried some questions I had for our hosts in Italy, but she also was checking out things like what are the apartments like, the students are going to stay in, and other things. So I'll give her the weekend to rest up. But I'm going to have a bunch of questions for her when I see her next week. But yeah, she's been our woman in Italy now this week, and
cool.
she's managed to. Well, I'm trusting, and in the meantime, we've managed to gain a few more students for the program. We're not quite sufficient yet, but it's getting close. So so I am hopeful.
Yeah, seems like this Italy program is the biggest one in our history.
Well, not in terms of student numbers yet, but definitely in terms of commitment. So, so we'll see.
Okay.
So you've got one other so far.
Yeah, actually, that's our problem. We got some issues with the message out, communication, promotions, stuff. So we had a meeting last week with Dr. Lester from communication and marketing. He promised to help, next semester to, promote our
Okay,
lectures and activities.
I should probably talk to him myself, actually.
Do you have a PowerPoint to share?
I have a PowerPoint and some other things I want to point out. I mean, the PowerPoint is just a PowerPoint that I have that I showed to the students the program, and I'll sort of go through that. I did have a few other things that I thought I could say about study abroad in general, about my own experience, for anybody that's interested in pursuing that. I'm happy to share that with the two of you, or anybody else who turns up.
Hi, Ria. Yeah, so jump in. Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Ria. I'm over in the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry. Yeah, so I know a few people, I mean, including myself, have been interested in like study abroad. So any information you're willing to share on how to get one started,
Okay.
that would be great.
Okay. I'm happy to do that. I say give them another 2 minutes or so, Hongji, and then I'll just get underway whenever you want me to.
Cool. Oh, Ray, you're from chemistry.
Yes.
Yeah. Are you based Armstrong or Statesboro?
I'm in Statesboro.
Oh, Statesboro.
Yes.
Did you have any experience before, study abroad?
I have none, but I know a couple of colleagues who are interested in like say Ghana, or like even from me, like it would be like Trinidad. So I did try before to not really a study abroad, but like some type of grant, some type of collaboration.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, well, I mean, you know how it goes. Just it didn't work out, but
yeah, chemistry. Because right now currently we have another program called COIL, which is a collaboration, course we want to promote next semester. One of our faculty members from Georgia Southern teaching a class here, and also we can find another professor from another country teaching their class, so that you can collaborate online, sharing their teachings, to students, from both countries.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't have any, people, any subjects from science or technology. If you could join, that would be really cool.
Yeah, shoot me an email, maybe.
Sure. Yeah. We'll
we can
spread the information soon.
Yeah,
well,
sure.
Yeah, I will say that one of the excuse me, one of the standard comments I get from a lot of students is that, well, gee, I'm a business major, or I'm a chemistry major, or I'm an engineering major. Why aren't there any study abroad programs for us, or something like that? And I usually end up saying, well, there are, but they're rare. That most study abroad programs are going to be humanities, social sciences,
right?
Based, just by the nature of the case, but that they do exist. And if we could get anything going like that, that'd be cool. I'd definitely be in favor of that.
Yeah, I think so. So yeah, it's good because even students from science or technology, they can still benefit a lot from a study abroad program. Get some international experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe Tim, you can start.
Sure. Okay. Well, I'll just get underway here, and I'll try to keep this as simple as I can. First of all, Ria, since I assume you don't know me, I'm not in the chemistry department, obviously. I'm in the history department.
Okay.
And I've been here an embarrassingly long time. I came to Georgia Southern in '91. And I was somewhat in an odd situation of having a PhD in classical history, Greece and Rome, and I traveled a good bit and studied in Greece and various places, but somehow I'd never gotten to Italy.
Okay.
And I've been making up for it ever since. So I first went to Italy as part of a Fulbright program, actually back in '93, and studied at the American Academy in Rome, and did some other things. And that was sort of my beginnings of all this. I got involved in study abroad at Georgia Southern in '99, when I participated in a summer abroad program in Paris, as part of what was at that time called the European Council. And now I've been told they go under another name now, but there used to be, whatever it is now, it was the European Council of the University System of Georgia, which operated some cooperative study abroad programs. And one thing, actually, if you are interested in looking into trying to teach a chemistry course, is to see if any of those programs are looking for a chemist. I mean, trying to sort of expand their offerings or something like that. There's Laura.
Hey, Laura.
So that's how I got started. Since then, since '99, I've taken Georgia Southern students to Europe one way or another 13 times.
Oh, wow.
There was once to Paris, once to Germany, and 11 times to Italy.
Oh, nice.
And 7 of those times were in a program in Montepulciano in Tuscany, which is run out of Kennesaw, which we participated in. And I'm not sure if we still have faculty participating in that program anymore. But then I did 4 times in a program that I organized that was based in a place called Montecompatri, which is in the hills outside of Rome. And one thing which I would point out to anybody who's interested in study abroad at Georgia Southern is that study abroad here, for better or for worse, I mean, there are pluses and minuses of this, tends to be faculty based. That is to say that there is an office, and I'll talk about them in a moment, the Office of Global Engagement, with whom I work closely, but who I don't speak for. I want to be clear. I mean, I'm not taking their place. There are all kinds of questions you might have, which would be better addressed to them. But generally speaking, although the administration, I've been here for several administrations, they'll always say, oh, we want more students to study abroad. And they'll never say, oh, we don't want that. But they will still ultimately put it in the hands of the faculty to organize and develop these things. There are some exceptions to that, but and we've got the thing now with Halle in Germany, for example, I know, which is a university to university arrangement, and which I've been looking into, and that's where the whole, I think, Sing Berlin thing came out of. And we have the Irish program now, which the administration is very big on. But beyond that, if one wants to do study abroad, it's pretty much up to us. And I will say also that in my experience, and I've learned a lot of tricks over the years, recruiting students for these things is, as well as arranging the programs themselves, is a huge amount of work. And you just have to settle your mind to that. I have dealt with a lot of faculty in different programs over the years who were under the impression, well, if I put up a flyer and I tell my students and I, send out a few emails, then surely they'll all come flocking to this opportunity. You would think they would, but in fact, it's kind of like pulling teeth. I did hear a percentage today from another faculty member. I don't know where he got this from. In which he said that somewhere he saw a survey that said that 47% of American university students say they want to study abroad, and 3% do. That's kind of what you're dealing with. And at Georgia Southern, I think students don't come here with that in mind. They should, and it should be part of the package that they get when they arrive on campus. It should be part of one of the things that we advertise for this place, but it tends not to be. Just to give you an idea, this is, I'm going to take over the screen for a second here, and host disabled. Can I share my screen, Hangji?
Yeah, I think so, Laura.
Well, it just said I can't. So host disabled.
It should let you know.
Okay, I'll try again. Now it keeps saying host disabled participant screen sharing. So I'm going to need to have screen share to put up the PowerPoint and some other things. So, there we go. Okay. Yep. All right. We're good. Yes. So we're going to share. I got to open my system preferences. Okay, fine. Now what do they want me to do? Okay, check Zoom US. Okay. Blah, 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 blah. Well, require the kind of, tell it is quit. I don't want to, okay, later. I don't need to do that. Okay. So that should enable that, and boom. Okay. So I'm going to share, I'm going to show first my calendar. As you can see, if you look at my calendar there, it's got all kinds of stuff in there. But if you start about September 31st, heading into October, and every one of those, like September 30th, pitch Italy, pitch Italy, pitch Italy. That is to say, I spent a day just going to classes, making my pitch. And if you will, hitting up all my colleagues and saying, please, can I come to your class? In fact, the reason I'm in my office today is that somebody in the English department very kindly on the Statesboro campus allowed me to come to his class and so on. Or again, on October 7th, pitch Italy, pitch Italy, pitch Italy. On October 14th, pitch Italy. Your calendar will fill up with that, because that's what you got to do, among other things. Spam the campus, constantly go to classes, put up posters, bother your friends, all kinds of things. And that's to get a dozen students. I've been sufficiently successful that I have gotten as many as 25 students to sign up for a summer program in the past. But that's part of what it takes. And as I say, because it is as faculty driven as it is, that's one of the things that you have to deal with. Now, getting back to what I was saying earlier, I had hoped that the program that I had set up, which had come by an opportunity I had, Jacek Lubicki, who at that point was the head of international studies, and this is going back a few years. He knew somebody here in the Department of Writing and Linguistics who knew somebody in Italy, and I made that connection and set up a program myself, which involved all kinds of things, working with our friends in Italy, and arranging buses, finding a place for students to sleep, getting familiar with Italian rail schedules and all kinds of things. All that becomes part of the package, and stuff that, frankly, unless you're working in a program like a European Council program, where a lot of that is taken care of by the directors of the program, then it kind of falls on you. And I had hoped to institutionalize the Monteculture program for Georgia Southern. I had hoped that this would be a program that we can institutionalize, would last beyond me, so to speak. But that didn't work out for reasons that would take up too much time to go into here. I was slated to do another program being run by a different member, somebody in geology, actually, that was going to be in Lucca in Italy. But then that was 2019, and guess what happened? Along comes COVID and everything shuts down. And in any case, I thought I had enough summer programs, that was going to be it. But then the opportunity for the semester program comes up, which I thought that was a new challenge, a different challenge, and I would try that. So what's this about? Well, prior to consolidation, back in the dim dark days before consolidation, Armstrong had a program based in Siena, Italy, that was in cooperation with the something called the Istituto Dante Alighieri, or the Dante Alighieri School. And let me try a new share. Okay, we'll try a different share here, and we'll go here, and we'll go here. Okay, right, the Dante Alighieri School. Dante Alighieri, the Institute of Dante Alighieri is more or less, if you're familiar with this sort of thing, sort of the Alliance Française or Goethe Institute of Italy. It's the institution that's charged with promoting Italian culture worldwide. It has a big operation in Siena. Its director is a guy named Luca Bonomi. Let me scroll down here a little bit, and you can see it's a pretty big operation. and with their own, they've been handling a lot of, they advertise, they've been handling a lot of American students. They've got their own sort of building and classrooms and so on. And there you can see, there we are, there on the left, Georgia Southern, as listed, but also several other institutions that have, that work with them. And quality guaranteed. And Luca, there's Luca. I've gotten to know Luca a bit, and he's been there, as they said, since '85, and he himself is very familiar with the American university systems. He knows what a credit hour is. You don't have to explain to Luca how the system works. He's been to Savannah. So anyway, there was this arrangement with Armstrong, and in the past, an Armstrong faculty member would take a few students over for term A. The faculty member would go home in term B and leave the students there in the hands of the Dante Alighieri School. And I wasn't interested in that. But anyway, after COVID, we're trying to revive this, but do it a bit differently. And instead of the term A, term B thing, I would go there with the students for the semester, and teach. I'll have to teach an online course while I'm doing it, just to be able to fulfill my obligations here. If you asked me, I would say I should get a course release for this, but I have every confidence that that will never happen, which once again tells you something about how Georgia Southern approaches study abroad. It is faculty based, and to have anything, you have to ask for it. The administration, and I'm talking by now of well over 20 years of different administrations, they do not come forward and offer this stuff to you. You have to go ask. Now, I should also say that I've worked over the years with various iterations of the study abroad office at Georgia Southern, up to and including its current incarnation. And I'll make a quick, see if I can find what I'm looking for here. There we go. To the Office of Global Engagement. And if you're interested in either participating in somebody else's study abroad program, because there are a lot of things that you can just sort of join into, or setting up your own, then that's the place you got to go. And I was the person who heads it is a woman named Kristen Casting-Karam, and Kristen is very good to work with. She is definitely overburdened. I will say that I don't think, of course, we all think that our departments are not funded enough, and we're all right, and it's all true. But nevertheless, hers is pretty seriously underfunded. It's basically Kristen and a secretary, and she ought to have an assistant director. And they were talking about that, but apparently that's been nixed in the latest budget issues. But anyway, so the person to contact about that is Kristen. There is now an online faculty proposal portal. And if you hit the faculty and staff resources, you can see the request forms. There you go, faculty proposal for study abroad and study away and so on. And you can sort of experiment with that, but it's a good idea to talk to Kristen first and try to track her down, because she's often in meetings. And as I say, there isn't an assistant director, unfortunately, but she's the one who will guide you through that process. You can also look at, as I say, the various other programs that are out there, whether they're run by the Office of Global Engagement, or run by whether it's the European Council or other international university system organizations, and apply with there, as I did for many years with the Montepulciano program. Now, at this point, I'm going to go to the PowerPoint and sort of roll through my sort of standard. Do this here. There we go. The sort of standard spiel that I will give to students, like I did this morning in the class. And I'll usually ask them how many of them are planning to study at Georgia Southern, whether it's next semester or in the summer. And all the hands will go up, and then I'll say how many of them would rather take those same classes in this case, Siena. And a few hands will go up, and then I'll start talking about the program itself. And I'll explain what it's not. In this case, it's not a spring break trip, and it's not a term A or term B, it's for the semester. We'll spend January here, and then February, March, April in Siena. And there are a variety of courses. There's our host, the Dante Alighieri School, and I'll talk about them for a minute. And then I'll talk about the courses themselves. Two of the courses that are taught by the Dante Alighieri School in the upper left there are required of every student. I'll be teaching the courses in the bottom left, and they'll have to take 2 out of those 3. And then the Dante Alighieri School will offer the various courses there on the right. They need at least 5 students to have one go, and they'll sign up for them. They'll be given Georgia Southern equivalents, and it's Kristen who handles that whole thing. But they register here. Kristen registers them at Georgia Southern, and they appear on their transcript as Georgia Southern courses. We do have a minimum requirement. This is, if it were a summer program, it would be a bit different. If we're a summer program, then you could say virtually anybody can apply. In this case, because of the semester program, we're requiring they be at least a sophomore. That they be at least a sophomore. They have at least the 2.5 GPA. We do point out that they don't have to have any Italian in order to do this, and that the second most widely spoken language in Italy after Italian is English. Which is almost too bad, as I tell the students, because you kind of want to get away from that after a while. The one Italian thing they have to go through is the Introduction to Italian Language and Culture, which is a kind of baby steps in Italian course, which is good for them. And so I'm happy to make them do it. And then I give them the contact info. You'll note that the way it's now set up through the global portal, students can just hit the QR code, and that will take them to the specific application for this specific program. And they can also contact the Office of Global Engagement, the so-called global portal. Siena itself, there's the info on the global portal, and that's where, if you want to get a hold of Kristen, I would, by the way, rather if you want to get a hold of Kristen, you want to investigate this after hunting around on the site a bit. I would go ahead and call, sending an email. She gets inundated with emails. So I would just try to find out when she expects to be in the Statesboro office and make an appointment to go see her, if you want to talk about actually working and study abroad. Siena itself, beautiful city, the great medieval city of Italy. It's down the road, of course, from Florence, which is the great Renaissance city of Italy. And I'll show pretty pictures so that they'll get some idea, but I will tell them that I'm not going to show them everything in Siena because that's what they're going there for. So I'll limit it to some degree, but I'll make a point of what it is they're going to see and what they're going to do, and I'll also point out that our food is good. Yes, as I say, I can't put up pictures of sex, but I can put up pictures of food. So I do try to draw them in, and with some of the other places that we're going to be going to. Then we get into how much does it cost, and here you've got to approach this somewhat gingerly because it does involve significant dollars. In this particular, most summer programs, when you do it, particularly if you include airfare, summer programs run from 3 weeks to 5 weeks. The programs I've been involved in have been 5 weeks long, and I'll usually try to do it earlier rather than later because we're going to Italy and it gets hot when you get into July and August. So in the past when I've done summer programs, I tried to keep them to May and June. But going back a few years, it was costing $6,000–7,000. It's probably at least that much now. But I point out to them that in a summer program, you are coming back for credit hours. It's not a $7,000 vacation. You're taking classes and you do come back with. And in the case of the semester program, the total cost, both what you paid to Georgia Southern, and what you pay to the program and so on and so forth. The total cost is going to be around $12,000. And then that's the bad news. Then I get into the good news, which is that student aid can be applied. They can use HOPE, they can use Pell, they can use FAFSA, and other forms of student aid. And then there are scholarships. And the Office of Global Engagement has some scholarships under their control, as well as others they can point students to. Right now, we're offering students who sign up and pay the deposit, we're offering them $1,000 scholarship. Those are going to run out soon, but we do have and more after that. And then you have to point out how much it's going to cost them to spend a semester here. If you actually add up a semester at Georgia Southern, the real cost, which is to say, not just what you paid at Georgia Southern, but your room, gas for your car, meals, hanging with your friends, going to the movies, virtually everything, it's going to typically cost most students something like $8,000, $9,000, $10,000. That's what it actually costs them. So when you say 12,000, it's not zero Georgia Southern versus 12,000. It's more like 8, 9, 10,000 versus 12,000, and then it becomes a bit more reasonable. We do ask for a large deposit. We do set deadlines that we will typically extend if we haven't quite reached our goals yet. And then I always point out that employers, this is one of those selling things, are always looking for international experience. And I can point out articles, whether it's in the Times or whatever, where employers are now coming to expect that of students, that it's not just a nice little gold star add-on, that this is something that students, that employers are actually looking for on the resume. Anyway, then I'll stop with this one, my favorite, what's wrong with this picture? And the answer is that, of course, you're not in it, which is to say, those are all my students, except for that gray-haired guy in the left, who was the chair of the English department, and who was my partner in crime in that particular occasion. And there we all are in Siena, on the summer program that I created in Montecompetri, and that's what we're all about. So that's the pitch. Let me see if I can stop the share. Okay, there we go, and that's it. And I'm happy to answer any questions I can. If anybody out there, I see you've been joined by Nalanda. Hello, as well as Ria. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have as best as I can.
Thank you, Dr. Teeter. I'm camera off. I'm on multitasking. I'm at the Diversity Summit with the US. You have been asked to do that. So I'm hopping in and hopping out.
Well, glad to have you.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I have a question in practical matters, right? Semester long. I just worry. I love the idea of having this institute, housing, and doing all that. Is there liability? Are you expected to, know what the students are doing at all times? Or
well, that we are in the application. There is a space for, what are you going to do about security and that sort of thing. The short answer is that to some degree, and this is another one of those things that people have to accept about study abroad. I mean, one of the most annoying things about study abroad is that when you come home, your colleagues will say, "Oh, and how was your vacation?" And you want to hit them because in fact, you're on 24/7.
Right.
It's just the reality of that. I sleep well at night. I haven't had, I don't think I've ever had a 3 o'clock in the morning, "Hello, I've been arrested" phone call from a student. That hasn't happened in my experience, but I know for a fact that things like that happen. I've dealt with plenty of other, I mean, there are the horror stories, which I'm happy to say, cross myself and hope that I will continue with my positive streak. I have never had to do that, had to deal with some of the terrible things that have happened, and I've never had to send a student home, although it's come close. But it is also the case that as part of your responsibility, as I tell the students, at least in the programs that I ran, that when it came to being there, I was judge, jury, and executioner. That if they endangered themselves, there's a warning system. Transgress once, we have a talk. Transgress twice, and you're going home. And I've never had to do that, but we have that conversation. I have what I call the bad guy talk before we go over. And I say, this is my bad guy talk, folks. This is where I tell you all the things you can't do and what will get you into trouble. And we'll get back all the happy stuff later, but for now, and so there's a whole long speech you have to make about their responsibilities. There's also the Office of Global Engagement has them sign a responsibility statement and so on. I know that both I and Luca Bonomi and Istituto will be available 24/7. They'll have my number and so on. That if, and well, not if, when they travel on their own, as they inevitably will, they have to tell me. I mean, they can't just say, oh, well, I went to Venice this weekend. No, you signed a piece of paper saying, I'm going to Venice this weekend. Here is my contact, and this is where I expect to be staying, et cetera, et cetera. And I say, fine, and then I don't bother them. And I have yet to have that phone call where, hi, I'm in Venice and I've been arrested or something like that. And we trust that they're sufficiently responsible that they won't do that. But I don't want to go through all the scary. And if you've ever heard the name Amanda Knox, I don't know if you have. There's a Netflix. You can look her up. There's a Netflix documentary about her. She was the American student who was arrested for murder. Well, she has a rather complicated story, and she has consistently maintained her innocence, and she is now back in the U.S. And I'm certainly not going to rehearse that story, but it's well worth watching for understanding some of the things that can theoretically go wrong. So they get a long speech about what can go wrong. When I was in the Montepulciano program and when I was in my own program, Montecompetri, I knew where the hospital was. I did once in the Montecompetri program have a student who, despite one of the things I will always tell students is we're going to be doing a lot of walking. You need to wear comfortable, safe shoes, and inevitably some of them don't listen. I mean, they just won't take that in, no matter how many times you say it. And I had a student who wanted to show off her lovely feet in those very fashionable sandals, and she twisted her ankle. And she twisted it rather badly. And we spent some time in the ER, a long time in the ER, and I had to sit with her. And that was the closest to that kind of thing that I ever had to deal with. All they did ultimately, she sat there so long, she finally said, okay, I'm sorry I have a twisted ankle, but I'm just going to go home. And I said, okay, we'll just go back, but it's on you. I do know that on another occasion in Montepulciano, there was a student who drank too much, and she fell and broke a toe. I mean, it was like one of those hairline fracture sorts of things. And the hospital there was very good. They put her in a cast, which she did not care for, but that was too bad. And then they got her crutches, which she hated. But hey, you drink too much and you break your toe, that's the way it's going to be. And then she was dying to go with her friends to Cinque Terre, which is a very popular place to go. And she says, I'm taking off my said, I would really strongly, I can't stop you. I mean, I'm not going to stand over you and do this. It's your call. That was how he chose to deal with it. And she said, okay. And as I've said, the students in the past, and someday it'll be bitter cold outside and her aching, unhealed foot will be driving her crazy, but that's her call, right? So there's a certain amount of discretion, if you will. I've had some, one or two moments where we've had to sit down with students and say, don't do that again, or you're going to go home. And that's part of the package.
I'm sorry if you already said this, but is there health insurance there? Or
yes, there is a health insurance package that they have to pay for before they go.
Gotcha.
That's part of the that's one of the things the Office of Global Engagement does. And then, of course, in Italy, it's public health. I mean, that is to say that you just go to the doctor,
right?
And or the hospital or whatever. We actually had a student once in Montepulciano who didn't want to admit it, but finally had to go to the director, which wasn't me, happily, because she was impacted. Right, it was rather very embarrassing. And he said, okay, he takes her to the hospital. The doctor took care of it very quickly. I mean, I assume they used something to clean her out, shall we say. But she hauls out the card that she had and says, oh, okay, boom, no problem. That was that. I'm sure she never saw a bill. So it's going to depend to some degree on the medical. I mean, I always make a point of knowing where the hospital is and who the local doctor is.
Yeah.
And in this case, I'm trusting in the Istituto Dante Alighieri, which is, I'm sure by now, since they say they've handled thousands of American students, they probably sent a few of them to the doctor by now. But in my case, I do try to know where that is. So yes, there's some responsibility on your part in that respect too.
I'm sorry, I'm the one asking all the questions.
But please ask away.
So do you drive? And just on a practical term, you said you had to bring the student to the emergency room. This was during a planned tour. So what happened to the other students?
Okay. In this particular case, we were in Montepulciano when it happened. So we were at our home, so to speak.
Okay.
And in that particular case, the director, Bob Wellborn, had a car. And he knew how to get to the local hospital, and so he just took her. If that weren't the case, he presumably would have gotten somebody to take her, because we also had a local institution that was connected with them. If an emergency happens on a field trip, then we just do whatever it takes to get them to the nearest medical situation, which, as I say, the closest that ever happened to that was when the student twisted her ankle and we were on our way back from, I think it was from Florence, and we pulled over at one point and got some ice at a local station, a local gas station, and put the ice on her ankle, and then eventually got her all the way back to our home base, and I took her to the hospital.
Gotcha.
And,
Okay.
and I think we either got somebody to drive us or we took a cab.
I was just wondering if the tour had to be interrupted and you sent everybody home, or
No.
somebody else.
Although again, I can conceive of how that you can spin out scenarios where that might happen. It's not hard to imagine that, but that didn't happen in those particular cases.
I just had a question about, like, why. I know at the beginning students all are interested in study abroad, and then like afterwards they're not so much. Do you know like why that is, and is there a way to like that? Is there a way besides?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there's a couple of things about that. First of all, I'll start with the bad news and then go to the good news. The bad news is, first of all, that students at Georgia Southern, in my experience in particular, don't expect to do study abroad. That is to say that at a different institution, let's say it's UGA or some other more elite university, they might go there saying, yeah, and then there's this, and it would be part of what the administration points out. And yes, we have our home in Paris where you can spend a semester, blah, blah, blah. But students who come to Georgia Southern, I am always pointing out to them and saying, you guys tend to think that's things they do at other schools, and that's not true. We do that at Georgia Southern. We do have study abroad. Thousands of students from Georgia Southern have done this, and there's you sort of have to excite their imagination a little bit, that this actually does happen, that it's not just theoretical. So that's one aspect of it. The other is that one of the things I've grown very used to over the years is students telling me, oh, I'm going to apply. I want to do this. And then, they'll say it to my face, look me right dead in the eye and say, this is definitely a program I'm going to do. And then they never sign up. So there's a certain fall off there. The good news is, however, that usually, I just spoke to a class this morning, and there must have been 40 or 50 students in there. There were about 10 or 15 who were very intrigued, and I suspect 1 or 2 who were enthusiastic. And you do sort of have to accept that those are the odds that you're facing when you walk into a classroom and make a pitch for the program, that you're doing well if you get 2 or 3 enthusiastic students, and you're doing really well if one of those 2 or 3 applies for the program. I'll show the pretty pictures. I will mention, I feel perfectly free to be sexist about this. So I will point out to the men who never seem to do this, they will regularly be outnumbered by the women in the at least in Italy, by 2 to 1 or 3 to 1. That happens over and over and over again. It's just a regular thing, even though I'm making the pitch to the same groups of students. And I will point out to them, well, you will be outnumbered 2 or 3 to 1 by women. And some people would take that as a positive, shall we say. So, you know, I'll come up with any trick I can, like pointing out the food, and the cool places we'll be going, and so on and so forth. So, and there's a certain, how can I put it? You don't want to make it sound like vacation, because it's not. They are taking classes. And you do want them to be responsible citizens. On the one hand, you want to make it sound like fun, and because it is fun, and that it's part of something which, you know, their eyes are opened, and it's fascinating to me that well, for instance, in going to a place like, say, Italy, you'll have even, say, Catholic students who are going there, and as I put it, they're used to the 3.2 beer Catholicism of America, and they're not really ready for the 80 proof Catholicism that's going to meet them in Italy, and it's an eye-opener to them that they had never seen anything like this before. And so I try to point out that there are possibilities and experiences here which they will value forever. And I will use phrases like, it's life-changing, because it is. And that students, well, the Montepulciano, if you ever look at it, it's a movie set, literally. It's turned up in various movies and commercials and that sort of thing. And one of the things that tends to happen is people go there, fall in love, and don't want to leave. And there was the case of, she was a non-traditional student, as they say, and she went there one summer and fell in love with the place, and went home and told her husband, who was a retired military guy, and he said, okay. And he went back with her the next summer, and he wasn't impressed at all, so she left him. She left him, moved to Montepulciano, and married the local bookstore owner. I'm not making this up. As far as I know, she's still there. So when I say life-changing, I really mean it. You know, students propose to each other in Italy, and I'm still in touch with a lot of my Italy students from 10-15 years ago, and in fact, it's really touching is, from time to time, I will get you know, Facebook comments from students of mine who'd been to Italy with me and who went back 10 years later, and were so happy that they had already had an experience there, and that they could do it again. So I will talk up things like this as much as possible to try to, you know, as I say, excite their imagination about the possibilities.
Yeah, I gotcha. So I also, you mentioned like scholarships and whatnot. So I imagine like funds will be an issue for some students. So are the scholarships, like, how do you?
Well, the actual apply for and get scholarships end of it is handled by the Office of Global Engagement.
Gotcha. Okay.
Now, I mean, I've never even looked at the form. I know students who have gotten the scholarships.
Gotcha.
Right now, because there aren't a lot of programs going, and right now, because there aren't a lot of students apply, I mean, there's been a big hiatus in study abroad, not surprisingly, and we're still kind of coming out of the COVID curve.
Right.
So I've been able to tap into that some at the Office of Global Engagement to entice students to apply. I don't expect that as more programs come back online, and as we ramp up study abroad again, I don't expect that situation to continue. I think they'll become more competitive. So I've been fortunate in that respect, I think, for this particular program. But for instance, there are, Kristen was telling me she had under her control 3 scholarships of $1,250 apiece, but they're only for Armstrong students. Yeah, those were the conditions of the. But there are others. They range from 500 to 1,000. And as I say, if you go to the Office of Global Engagement website, there is a scholarship click link, which lists the various things that students can apply for. And I'll always include that in my pitch. I'll say, along with the fact that you can use things like Hope and Pell and so on for the program, that there are scholarships you can apply for.
Yeah. And so when you create the study abroad, so like how many courses do the students take, for example? I guess what type of courses, and like I guess what's a good balance between, you know, the classes and in quotation marks fun,
sure.
yeah, outside stuff.
Well, there's Georgia Southern requirements, and then there are practical issues for yourself. The Georgia Southern requirements are X number of contact hours. I think it's like 750 minutes per credit hour or something like that. I mean, you can sort of do the math.
Right.
Since you're with the students a lot, coming up with enough contact hours is not usually a problem, shall we say. So, but there are Georgia Southern requirements to meet. Then they're your own, and there are. Let me break this down into that I can think of off the top of my head, 4 different categories. In the case of cooperative programs like the Montepulciano program, which was a cooperative between Georgia Southern, Kennesaw, and I think it was, it still is, not Georgia State, but it's another one of the units in the system. You submit your courses to the guys at Kennesaw and say, I want to teach these 2 classes. And then they accept faculty for them. And if you are accepted, then you teach the 2 courses. You get together with the director and the other faculty. You work out how you're going to do your field trips so you can combine them as much as possible, so on and so forth. And those are 2 courses. Their system, which is fairly typical for European Council programs in the past, has been Mondays and Wednesdays class days, Tuesdays and Thursdays field trip days, then weekends free. And that's for 5 weeks. When we say class days, the classes last 2 hours, right? That's to get in enough contact hour time. And students will typically sign up for, I believe, 2 courses.
Okay.
That's the European Council system. If you're doing it, if you're setting up your own program, if it's just you, you can sometimes manage a 1 or 2 or 3 credit hour program for like 3 weeks in Costa Rica. You can do something like that. If it's not just you, which is what I did in Montecompteri, it was me and another faculty member. For the last 2 summers, it was David Dudley from the English department. We both taught 2 courses. We recruited students who could pick, that was 4 courses total. The program was for 5 weeks. We between the 2 of us worked out, when will we have our classes, morning or afternoon, and when will we go on field trips, and what are the field trips going to be, and how long will the classes be, and so on. And that was negotiations between me and David, and then the students signed up for what they wanted. And we had, I think the first summer we had 18 students. The second summer we had 25. Now, I will also say that the rules for paying faculty for this have changed over the years. And I will say, and this is something you need to resign yourself to, Georgia Southern, here's a shock, nickels and dimes you. Right? In other words, when I was in the Montepulciano program, and there were faculty from other schools, from Kennesaw or from another one of the state university systems schools that were participating, for some of them, if you taught 2 classes, you got paid for 2 courses. Georgia Southern's thing was, if you teach 2 classes, we'll pay you for 1. Right, and you just had right. There's no system-wide, university system-wide policy on this. And in the case of the program that I ran, It was you get paid X amount of your salary depending on how many students you recruit.
Okay.
And I can't remember what the numbers were, but that was how they did it for summer programs.
What about housing and living?
Right. Well, in the program that in for example the Montepulciano program, they have a partner. There's a local language school in Montepulciano called Il Sasso, and they're the ones that make a lot of their on-site arrangements. And one of the things that they would do, because a lot of people in Montepulciano, because it's a not overly touristed, I'm happy to say, but it's a popular place to go to. An awful lot of the locals will literally leave for the summer and rent out their apartments. And so Il Sasso would arrange for the students to stay in apartments in Montepulciano.
What about faculty though? I mean,
yeah, we were put in apartments too.
Is it part of the pay though, or do you have to pay?
No, it's part. No, you don't pay for your room.
Okay.
In the Montepulciano case, no, that wasn't right. You get your airfare is covered, your room is covered, your meals are covered, your courses you get at Georgia Southern, you get paid for one course. At least that's the way it has been. What the current rules are, it has been. I think the last time I did a Montepulciano was 2015. So it's been a few years. You would have to check with somebody like Kristen in the Office of Global Engagement. What are the rules now? But I wouldn't do this if I was going to lose money on it. Put it that way. When I did my own program, one of the reasons you had to recruit students, it's part of the budget form you fill out, is what are the faculty members' expenses? Because again, I'm not buying my own airfare. They're buying their airfare, but I'm not buying my airfare. That's covered by the program. And there are various other expenses that I would have that would be covered by like my room. I'll be in an apartment, if you will. So that's covered by what the students pay. How can I put this? For food, that varied. In the program that I ran, we in Montecompete, we stayed in a local hotel. We simply took over the hotel for the 5 weeks. We had an arrangement with them. They had a restaurant and a kitchen. When we were in Montecompete, we had our meals there. And that was covered. It was explained to the students that when we were breakfast and lunch might be up to themselves, but dinner would be covered when we were in Montecompete. So those arrangements will vary. And a lot of it's going to depend on who you're working with. In my case, for instance, in this semester program, we tell them meals are not covered. There'll be a welcome dinner and there'll be a farewell dinner. And they can pay a fee to eat meals in the university cafeteria if they want to, but otherwise meals are on their own, which isn't hard to do in Italy. I can tell you right now. They're in apartments, they can cook for themselves if they want to, but also street food in Italy is not only plentiful, but it's good and not very expensive. So that's going to depend on how you want to design the program.
Mm-hmm. Have you had to like deal with students with a lot of dietary restrictions?
Right. Sometimes there's 2 things here. Let me say 3 things about that. One is that occasionally there'll be a student who's like, well, I'm gluten-free or something like that. Well, because they really are. I mean, they have celiac or something of that sort. Right. And I will tell them, well, we will do the best we can, but understand that we're in a restaurant being provided by the hotel. They'll do what they can for you, but there's a limit and you're just going to have to work within that. There's only so far that we can make arrangements. Some students will say, well, I don't eat meat or I don't eat dairy or something like that. So that's fine. There's plenty of food. You can satisfy yourself and we can provide vegetarian meals, again, through the arrangements that we have. But that, again, depends on the arrangement. If the students are getting their own food, I can confidently tell them that I have literally seen bakeries in Italy, sweet shops, that had a sign in their window in English saying gluten-free.
Oh, good. Yeah, okay.
So it's not like Italy is behind the curve on providing those kinds of things. I mean, they do exist. There was something else I was going to say about food, and it has escaped me. So anyway.
A long time ago, I remember when I brought students to China, one of our students, couldn't eat Chinese food. So it's really, really, really hard for her to survive there. So every time I have to look for, KFC, McDonald's, Pizza Hut. It's so hard.
Well, yeah, which now reminds me of the other thing. Thank you, Hanji, because that reminds me of the other thing I was going to say, which is there tends to be two different reactions. Well, three. Most students just, it's the food, and you won't hear anything one way or the other. For many students, it tends, however, to be one of two things. One is, wow, this is different. This is really cool.
Right.
I love this.
Right.
And then there's the student says, oh my gosh, this is really different. I can't handle this, or something like that. And you just have to say, well, I'm sorry.
Right.
Then you're just going to have to deal with that. The other thing which I make a point of is that there are some things that you can't avoid. So when I would be taking them around Rome, for example, it's a well-walked course. I know where the restaurants are, and I say, okay, it's lunchtime. Here's the restaurant where you can all get something to eat, because I know at that point where we're going to be. There is one place where I will look the other way and say, if you really want to go to McDonald's, you can. Because they all want to do that, not because they want to go to McDonald's necessarily, but because they think there's something cool and exotic somehow about going to the McDonald's in Rome. That this is like
Yeah.
and so although I say, surely you didn't fly 3,000 miles in order to eat at McDonald's, but there is a point at which we're in Termini, we're in the main train station. And there's a McDonald's right next door to the Italian fast food place. And I will always go to the Italian fast food place, but I'll say, if this is your moment where you just have to do this, because it is cheap, it is convenient, and there are lots of Italians lined up to eat there too. So, and I tell them, I will look the other way, and I won't look down on you this one time. So yeah, that will come up inevitably. Actually, you can use, it's an interesting economics lesson, because there is something out there. There's a Wikipedia. I was looking at this the other day because we were talking about economics in antiquity. Something called the Big Mac Standard, which is literally an international economic index based on how many hours do you have to work in country X in order to be able to afford a Big Mac.
Right.
Right. This actually exists, and whole papers, whole economics papers have been written on this. So if you want to teach it, turn it into a teaching moment. How much in euros is your Big Mac costing you? What does that translate into dollars? And are you getting a better or a worse deal? And what is the coefficient here for price differences? You can do that. Most of them, I'm sure, will not do that. But if you've got an economics major in there, you could like assign them the McDonald's thing.
Good. That's good talk. I like your way to present the ideas, to students. So I guess the time almost there, 1 o'clock.
Wow, I've been going a lot longer than I thought I would. I can tell you.
It's fancy. Yeah, cool. I like it. Ria, if you don't have any more questions, Laura.